Chapter 2. I suppose there's a time in practically every young boy's life when he's affected by that wonderful disease of puppy love. I don't mean the kind a boy has for a pretty little girl that lives down the road. I mean the real kind. The kind that has 4 small feet and a waggy tail, and sharp young teeth that can gnaw on a boy's finger. The kind a boy can romp and play with and even eat and sleep with. I was 10 years old when I first became infected with that terrible disease. I'm sure no boy in the world had it worse than I did. It's not easy for a young boy to want a dog and not be able to have one. It starts gnawing at his heart and gets all mixed up in his dreams. It gets worse and worse until finally it becomes almost unbearable. If my dog wanting had been that of an ordinary boy, I'm sure my mother and father would have gotten me a puppy, but my wants were different. I didn't want just one dog, I wanted 2, and not just any kind of dog. They had to be a special kind and a special breed. I had to have me some dogs. I went to my father and had a talk with him. He scratched his head and thought it over. "Well, Billy," he said, "I heard that old man Hatfield's Coley's going to have some pups. I'm sure I can get one of them for you." He may have poured cold water on me. "Pa," I said, "I don't want any old Coley dog. I want hounds, coon hounds, and I want 2 of them." I could tell by the look on his face that he wanted to help me, but couldn't. "Billy, those kind of dogs, they cost money, and that's something we don't have right now. Maybe someday when we can afford it you can have them, but not right now." I didn't give up. After my talk with Pa, I went to Ma. Well, I fared no better there. Right off, she said I was too young to be hunting with hounds. Besides, a hunter needed a gun, and that was one thing I couldn't have. Not until I was 21, anyway. I couldn't understand it. There I was sitting right in the middle of the finest hunting country in the world, and I didn't even have a dog. Our home was in a beautiful valley, far back in the rugged Ozarks. The country was new and sparsely settled. The land we lived in was Cherokee land, allotted to my mother because of the Cherokee blood that flowed in her veins. It lay in a strip from the foothills of the mountains to the banks of the Illinois River on the northeast Oklahoma. The land was rich and black and fertile. Pa said it would grow hair on a cross-cut saw. He was the first man to stick the cold steel point of a turning plow into the virgin soil. Ma had picked the spot for our log home. It nestled at the edge of the foothills in the mouth of a small canyon and was surrounded by a grove of huge red oaks. And behind our house one could see for miles and miles of the mighty Ozarks. In the spring, the aromatic scent of wildflowers and red buds and pawpaws and dogwoods drifted on the wind currents and spread over the valley and around our home. Below our fields, twisting and winding, ran the clear blue water of the Illinois River. The banks were cool and shady. The rich bottom land near the river was studded with tall sycamores and birches and box elder. To a 10-year-old country boy, it was the most beautiful place in the whole wide world, and I took advantage of it all. I roamed those hills and the river bottoms, and I knew every game trail in the thick canebrakes and every animal track that was pressed into the mud along those river banks. The ones that fascinated me the most were the baby-like tracks of a river coon. I'd lay for hours examining them. Before leaving, I'd take a switch and sweep them all away. These I called my trail looks, and the next day I'd hurry back, and sure enough, 9 times out of 10, there on the clean-swept ground I would find the tracks of another ringtail coon. I knew he had passed over the trail during the night. I could close my eyes and almost see him, humped up and waddling along, fishing under the banks with his delicate little paws for crawfish and frogs and minnows. I was a hunter from the time I could walk. I caught lizards on the rail fences and rats in the corn crib and frogs in the little creek that ran through the fields. I was a young Daniel Boone. As the days passed, the dog-wanting disease grew worse. I could see dogs in my dreams. I went back to my mother and father. It was the same old story. Good hounds, they cost money, and they just didn't have it. My dog-wanting became so bad I began to lose weight, and my food didn't seem to taste good anymore. Ma noticed this, and she had a talk with Pa. "You'll have to do something," she said. "I never saw a boy grieve like that. It's not right. Not right at all." "Well, I know," said Pa. "I feel just as badly as you do, but what can I do? You know we don't have that kind of money." "I don't care," said Ma. "You gotta do something. I just can't stand to see him cry like that. Besides, he's getting to be a problem. I can't even get my work done. He follows me around all day long begging for hounds." "Well, I offered to get him a dog," said Pa, "but he just don't want any kind of dog. He wants hounds, and they cost money. Do you know what Parker's boys paid for those 2 hounds they bought? $75. If I had that much money, I'd buy another mule. I sure do need one." I had overheard that conversation from another room. At first, it made me feel pretty good. At least I was getting to be a problem. But then, I didn't feel so good. I knew my mother and father, they were poor and they didn't have any money, and I began to feel sorry for them and myself. After thinking it over, I figured out a way to help. Even though it was a great sacrifice, I told Pa that I decided I didn't want 2 hounds. One would be enough. I saw the hurt in his eyes. It made me feel like someone was squeezing water out of my heart. Pa set me on his lap, and we had a good talk. He told me how hard times were, and that it looked like a man couldn't get a fair price for anything he raised. Some of the farmers had quit farming and were cutting railroad ties just so they could feed their families. If things didn't get better, that's what he'd have to do. He said he'd give anything if he could get some good hounds for me, but there didn't seem to be any way he could do it. I went off to bed with my heart all torn up into little pieces, and I cried myself to sleep. The next day, Pa had to go to the store. Late that evening, I saw him coming back. As fast as I could, I ran out to meet him, expecting a sack of candy. Instead, he handed me 3 small traps. If Santa Claus himself had come down out of the mountains, reindeers and all, I couldn't have been more pleased. I jumped up and down and cried a whole bucket full of tears, and I hugged him and told him what a wonderful Pa he was. He showed me how to set him by mashing the spring down with my foot and how to work the trigger. I took them to bed with me that night. The next morning I started trapping around the barn. The first thing I caught was Sammy, our house cat. If that didn't cause a commotion. I didn't intend to catch him. I was trying to catch a rat, but somehow he was nosing around and got in my trap. Well, my sister started bawling and yelling for Mama, and she came a-running, wanting to know what in the world was going on. None of us had to tell her. Sammy told her with his spitting and squalling. He was mad. He couldn't understand what that thing was that was biting his foot, and he was making an awful fuss about it. His tail was as big as a wet corn cob, and every hair on his small body was sticking straight out. He spit and yowled and dared anyone to get close to him. My sisters were yelling their fool heads off the whole time. "Poor Sammy, poor Sammy." Mama shushed them up and told me to go get the forked stick from the clothesline, so I ran and got it. Ma was the best helper a boy could ever have. She put that forked end over Sammy's neck and pinned him to the ground. Well, it was bad enough for the trap to be biting his foot, but to have his neck pinned down that way was just too much, and he threw himself a fit. I never heard such a racket in all my life. It wasn't long before everything on the place was all spooked up. The chickens started cackling and flew all the way up the hillside. Daisy, our milk cow, all but tore the barn lot up and refused to give any milk that night. Sloppy Ann, our hog, started running in circles, squealing and grunting. Well, Sammy wiggled and twisted. He yowled and spit, but didn't do him any good. Ma was good and stout, and she held him down tight to the ground. I rushed in and put my foot on the trap spring, mashing it down, and released his foot. With one loud squall, he scooted under the barn. After it was over, Ma said, "I don't think you'll have any more trouble with that cat. I think he might have learned his lesson." Well, how wrong Ma was. Sammy was one of those nosy kind of cats. He would lie up on the red oak limbs and watch every move I made. I found some slick little trails out of our garden down some tall hollyhocks, thinking they were game trails and not knowing that they were Sammy's favorite hunting trails. Well, I naturally set my traps. Sammy couldn't understand what I was doing there, messing around with his hunting territory, so he went to investigate. It wasn't long until I saw him limping with all 4 feet. Every time Pa saw Sammy lying around in the warm sun with his feet wrapped up in turpentine rags, he would laugh until big old tears rolled down his cheeks. Ma had another talk with Pa. She said he was going to have to say something to me, because if I caught that cat one more time, it would drive her out of her mind. So Pa told me to be a little more careful where I set my traps. "Pa," I said, "I don't want to catch Sammy, but he's the craziest cat I ever saw. He sees everything I do and just has to go sniffing around." Pa looked over at Sammy. He was laying all sprawled out in the sunshine with all 4 paws bandaged and sticking straight up. His long tail was swishing this way and that. "You see, Pa, he watches me right now, just waiting for me to go set my traps again." Pa walked off towards the barn, and I heard him laughing fit to kill. It finally got too tough on Sammy. He left home. Oh, he came back once in a while, all long and lean looking, but he was never the same friendly cat anymore. He was nervous and wouldn't let anyone pet him. He would gobble down his milk and then scoot off for the timber. Once I decided to make friends with him because I felt bad about catching him in my traps. I reached out my hand to rub his back, and he swelled up like a sitting hen. His eyeballs got all green, and he growled all the way down deep inside. He spat at me and drew back his paw like he was going to knock my head off. It's then I decided I'd best just leave him alone. In no time at all, I'd cleaned out all the rats, and then something bad happened. I caught one of Ma's prize hens. I got one of those young man peach tree switchings over that one. Pa told me to go down to the cane breaks back of our fields and go trap there. This opened up all kinds of new wonders. I caught opossums and skunks, rabbits and squirrels. Pa showed me how to skin my game. In neat little rows, I tacked the hides onto the smokehouse wall. I'd stand for hours and admire my magnificent trophies. There was only one thing wrong. I didn't have a big coon skin to add to my collection. I couldn't trap old Mr. Ringtail. He was too smart for me. He'd steal the bait from the traps, spring the triggers, and sometimes just turn them over. Once I found a small stick standing upright in one of my traps, and I showed it to Pa. He laughed and said the stick must have fallen from a tree. Well, it made no difference what Pa said. I was firmly convinced that that old coon was deliberately poking that stick into my trap. The traps helped my dog wanting considerably, but like a new toy, the newness wore off, and I was right back to where I started. Only this time it was worse. Much worse. I had been exposed to the feel of wildlife. I started pestering Ma again, and she said, "Oh, no, not that again. I thought you'd be satisfied with the traps. No, Billy, I'll not hear another word about the hounds." I knew Ma meant what she said, and this broke my heart. I decided I'd leave home. I'd sneak out a quart jar of peaches and some cold corn bread and a few onions and start up the hollow back of the house. I had it all figured out. I'd go away off to some big town and get 100 dogs and bring them all back with me. I made it all right until I heard a timber wolf howl. Well, this stopped my home leaving. When the hunting season opened that fall, something happened that almost more than I could stand. I was laying in bed one night trying to figure out a way I could get some dogs when I heard the deep baying of a coonhound. I got up and opened my window, and it came again. The deep voice rang loud and clear on the frosty night, and now and then I could hear the hunter whooping to him. The hound hunted all night. He quit when the rooster started crowing in the morning. The hunter and the hound weren't the only ones awake all that night. I stayed up and listened to them until the last tones of that voice of the hound died away in the daylight hours. That morning, I was determined to have some hounds, so I went to Ma again. This time I tried bribery. I told her if she'd get me a hunting dog, I'd save the money I'd earned from my furs and buy her a new dress and a box full of pretty hats. That time I saw tears in her eyes, and it made me feel all empty inside, and I cried a little too. By the time she was through kissing me and talking to me, I was sure I didn't need any dogs at all. I couldn't stand to see Ma cry. The next morning, I heard the hound again. I tried to cover my head with my pillow to shut out the sound. It was of no use. His voice seemed to bore its way through the pillow and ring in my ears. I had to get up and again go to the window. I'm sure if that coon hunter had known he was slowly killing a 10-year-old boy, he would have put a muzzle on his dog. Sleep was out of the question. Even on nights when I couldn't hear the hound, I couldn't sleep. I was afraid if he did, he'd come and I'd miss hearing him. By the time that hunting season was over, I was a nervous wreck. My eyes were red and bloodshot. I'd lost weight and was as thin as a beanpole. Ma, she checked me over. She looked at my tongue and turned back one of my eyelids. If I didn't know better, I'd swear you aren't sleeping well. Well, Ma, I go to bed, don't I? What does a boy go to bed for if it isn't for sleeping? By the little wrinkles that bunched up on her forehead, I could tell that Ma wasn't satisfied. Pa came in during one of those inspections, and Ma told him she was worried about my health. Oh, there's nothing wrong with him. It's just that he's been cooped up all winter. Boy needs some sunshine and exercise. He's almost 11 now, and I'm going to let him help in the fields this summer. That should put some muscle back on him. I thought this was wonderful. I'd finally grown up to be a man. I was going to be helping Pa with the farm. End of chapter 2.